The 2011 film The Artist represents the ending of the origins of the classical Hollywood style, the silent period, which ranges from the years 1908 to 1927, to the early years of the classical Hollywood style, Hollywood's golden age, which ranges from the years 1927 to 1947. This film is a representation of the silent movie era leading into the talkie era, where movies started to have dialogue. But before we get into talking about both of these film movements, we should start by defining what film history is. According to the textbook Looking at Movies: An Introduction to Film, written by Richard Barsam and Dave Monahan, film history traces the development of moving images from early experiments with image reproduction and photography through the invention of the movies in the early 1890s and subsequent stylistic, financial, technological, and social developments in cinema that have occurred up to now. The artist represents the ending of the silent period, which is the origins of the classical Hollywood style that dates from 1908 to 1927. According to the textbook, Barsam and Monahan state that the silent era of film history is distinguished by Edwin S. Porter's and D. W. Griffith's developments in narrative form, the crystallization of the classical Hollywood style, the ascendance of Hollywood as the center of the world's motion picture industry, the development of movie genres, and early experiments with color and animation. The artist represents the ending of the silent era because as the movie starts and we view the first scenes of the film, George Valentin, a famous silent movie actor, is big in Hollywood because he put silent movies on the map. He made a lot of money and sold out theaters because everyone wanted to see his films. The audience loved his silent films and so did the producers because silent films were big and many wanted to see them. In an interview with Collider, director Michael H. talks about the artist. A question that was asked to him was about immersing himself in silent movie form and how that immersion informed the choices he made. And Michael stated that he watched a lot of movies, read autobiographies, and listened to music by classical era composers like Franz Waxman, Max Steiner, Bernard Herrmann, Alfred Newman, and Leonard Bernstein. Michael also looked at photos from Hollywood in the 20s and photographs of silent movies being filmed all over the world. In a comparison, another film that was popular during the silent era and that was made during this time is J. Stuart Blackton's The Life of Moses, which was released in 1909, a year after the silent film era began. This movie is a silent film about the biblical story of Moses and was a multiple reel film. Another film movie that the artist represented is classical Hollywood style and Hollywood's golden age. According to Barsam and Monahan in the textbook, the golden age of Hollywood was the most powerful and prolific period of film history yet. It is notable for the transition from silent to sound production, consolidation of the studio system, exploitation of familiar genres, imposition of the motion picture production code, changes in the look of movies, and the economic success of feature length narrative films. Yet it was less a movement than a force, for in this period the movies became inextricably linked with the development of the American culture and society. From this point forward, the movies defined America, and America defined itself through the movies. The artist showcases the change of film through the fresh, young, and new talent of Poppy Miller and how the production company wanted to transition into the new era of sound and talk about giving what the people what they want. And the people audiences wanted sound. The film also showed the effects of real American history, which was toward in the 1920s with the stock market crash and the Great Depression. And Americans such as George lost everything from their house, their job, and their money and had to find a way to make a living for themselves again. In the same interview, director Michael stated that the Russians were good with editing, the German expressionism was much more than cinema, and the French were something else. Michael said that he had chosen the American ones more or less the last 5 years of the silent era because those are the ones that age the best way they tell a story. Michael did stated that it's about human beings with context and a classical story with feelings, laughter, melodrama, and it works. In comparison to the representation of the golden age of Hollywood, Frank Capra's 1939 film Mr. Smith Goes to Washington represents American government. In the textbook, Bar Sam Monahan described the scene when the main character Smith is finishing his filibuster before the U.S. Senate by pleading with his fellow senators to stand up and fight the corruption that is preventing the realization of his dreams to finance a national camp for boys. This scene represents and provides stereotypes about the American government, which that the American government is only looking out for those who have power and money, and that those who do not have power and money have to struggle in order to gain power against those who are in power, with the hope that an average American citizen can still have a voice in our country and what direction America is heading in. In an interview with Interview Magazine by Emma Brown, Andrew Bresson, and Michael Morin, Frank Capra talks about how there is little music in his films, but this is because he realized very early that people were important, not music. Capra states, "There is music in my films, but you seldomly hear it. Very early, I got the idea that the important things in film were people, not the actors. They are the intermediary between the director and the audience. They make direct contact, people to people communication. If the audience gets everything else, if they see the photography and notice that it is good, then the story goes out the window. But if you become involved with the lives of the actors and forget that you are seeing mechanical devices on a huge screen, forget the make believe, this is the job of the director to involve the audience with the actors." The Artist, The Life of Moses, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington all fall with the silent era to the sound era in American film history. These films show us how the film industry adapted to change when change was inevitable. These films remind us how sound, color, and other technological advances change how we use to watch films. With films like The Artist, the audience gets to relive the past on how technology and experimenting has paved the way for future directors and other people within the film industry to create new and creative pieces of ideas that are transformed into new and fresh films.